Còn bây giờ, Khôi xin phép được giới thiệu chi tiết một unit trong bộ sách tiếng Anh 7, Think. Unit 1, Having Fun. Objectives, Functions, talking about routines and everyday activities, expressing contrast ideas, expressing likes and dislikes, talking about what people are doing at the moment. Grammar, adverbs of frequency, connectors, although, however, like plus in, present simple versus present continuous, vocabulary, hobbies, collocations. Reading 1. If there is an interactive whiteboard available in the classroom, the picture description would best be done as a heads-up activity with the whole class. Say sleeping and nominate a strong student to point to the correct picture on the board. The rest of the class check and confirm or reject answers. There may be some pictures the students disagree about. Remind them that each word should only be used once, so they should try and work out the best answer through elimination. Optional extension. Students work in pairs to test each other about the activities. They look at the photos, cover the exercises, and take turns to point to a photo at random and ask, "What's this?" Monitor the activity and conclude things. 2. Speaking. Check comprehension of fun by asking students to name activities they consider fun. Also, check if students understand the difference between always, sometimes, and never. Draw a line with 0% at one end and 100% at the other end on the board, and ask students to situate each adverb at the appropriate place on the line. Then students go through the list in exercise 1 and complete the statements. Ask students to work in pairs and give them 2 minutes or so to compare their ideas. Do the activity is a contest between groups. Which group will be the first to come up with at least 10 activities? Ask the winning group to tell the class their 10 activities and write any new phrases on the board. The other students should cross off all the words they also have on their list as they hear them, and tell you any other words they have thought of to be added to list on the board. Then give the groups a couple of minutes to discuss which activities they think are and aren't fun. They have to try to find activities that they agree about. Monitor and check the use of the new vocabulary. 4. Ask students to cover up the text and look at the title only, or display the page on the interactive whiteboard if you use one, and zoom in to the title. Ask students what they think the text is about and write their ideas on the board. Prediction helps motivate students to read and find out if they're right. Then ask the class to look at the pictures and elicit what the person is doing in each case. This is a good opportunity to teach the words smile, relax, crossword puzzle, and happy if students don't already know them. 5. Speaking. Ask students to compare their ideas with their partners. Think values. Taking care of yourself. 1. Ask the class, why is it important to take care of yourself? Elicit some simple ideas in response, such as, because it's important to be healthy. You can't enjoy life if you aren't healthy, etc. Then give students a minute to go through the list and match the questions with the items in the list. 2. Speaking. Allow 2 or 3 minutes for the pair work activity. Monitor the conversations as the focus is on fluency and educating the whole learner. Avoid correcting errors unless they hinder comprehension. Check answers with the class. Optional extension. Ask students to rank the ways of being healthy in order of importance and compare their ideas with their partner. Encourage them to try to give reasons for the ideas, but stress that there are no right or wrong answers. Pairs should try to agree on the top 3 most important ways to take care of themselves. Monitor and help with vocabulary is needed. Conduct home class feedback to find out what different pairs think are the most important things they should do to take care of themselves. Grammar review, adverbs of frequency. 1. Ask students to work out the answers for the task and label the diagram with adverbs of frequency in the correct position. 2. Give students 2 minutes or so to complete the sentences. The answers will be used later in exercise 4. Ask them to compare answers in pairs by trying to predict which adverb of frequency their partner has used for each situation. 3. Write every day, 3 times a week and once a year on the board, and give some examples of your own. For example, I drink coffee every day. I go to the supermarket 3 times a week. I go on holiday once a year to get students started. Then give the class a minute or 2 to complete the sentences with their ideas. 4. Read the example with the class to introduce the questions. How often do you? Refer to the examples you wrote on the board for exercise 3 and turn them into questions. How often do you drink coffee? Go to the supermarket, go on holiday, etc. And elicit answers from individual students. Use their answers to build up the formula once, twice, 3, 4 times a day, week, month, etc. And write these on the board. Ask students to compare their ideas in small groups for 2 or 3 minutes and find the person who gave the most similar answers to them. 6. Ask students to match the 2 halves of sentences individually, then compare ideas in pairs before you check answers with the class. 7. Students work individually to rewrite the sentences. Students compare answers in pairs before you check with the whole class. 8. Speaking. Students write some sentences about themselves and compare them in pairs. Monitor as they are doing this and make a note of common errors. Write these up on the board, ensuring anonymity, and ask students to correct them during whole class feedback. Vocabulary. Hobbies. 1. To lead into the activity, ask students to look through pages 14 to 15 and find any hobbies mentioned so far. Stronger students could try and answer from memory. Elicit and write them on the board or ask students to come to the board to write them. Try to elicit phrases rather than single words. For example, play football, do crossword puzzles. You could also elicit examples of students' own hobbies. Students match the verbs with the nouns in the exercise individually, then check in pairs before a final check with the whole class. When checking answers, students may come up with other acceptable alternatives. For example, keep a blog, collect photos, or write things. Fast finishes. Students try to think of further hobbies where they write, take, keep, or collect things and make a list. Optional extension. Test how well students remember the collocations. Call out either the verb or the noun and nominate a student to say the home phrase. For example, you say play or instrument. They say play an instrument. Alternatively, put students in pairs to take turns to test each other in the same way. 2. Speaking. Look at the example with the class so the task is clear to students. They must first ask a yes-no question, then follow it up with a WH question, asking for more details. Students take turns to ask and answer questions about their hobbies in pairs, using the phrases from exercise 1. 1. Ask them to find at least 2 interesting things they could share with the rest of the class about their partners. Monitor students' use of the various forms of the present simple. Make a note of any grammar errors to go over at the end of the activity, but avoid interrupting conversations. Input any unfamiliar vocabulary. For example, names of instruments the students need. If there is an interactive whiteboard available, do this on the screen with books closed. Ask students, which picture shows a piano player? B. A footballer? A. Two atoms? A. No girls? C. Somebody sitting? B. A door? C. Students then open the books to check their answers. How many did they get right? Direct students' attention to the sentences and check they understand headache. 2. Before you play the audio again, give students the opportunity to complete the sentences with the details they remember from the first listening and check ideas in pairs. Drill the pronunciation of the names and the box. Students repeat in chorus after you, so students will recognize them when they hear them. Play the recording, pausing after each conversation to allow time for students to note their answers. As you check answers, play the audio again, pausing at the relevant parts. Think self-esteem. Why is it good to have a hobby? 1. Refer students back to the people on top of the page and elicit their names before asking them to complete the exercise. Students check answers in pairs before you check with the whole class. Give students 30 seconds to decide which of the 3 statements they agree with the most or is closest to their own experience. Ask students to tell the class which statement they agree with the most and why. 2. Ask students about their own hobbies. Tell them to think about why their hobbies are good for them and to make notes about this. Allow about a minute or so for this stage before turning to the pair work activity. Ask students to discuss their hobbies with their partner. Extend the activity by asking students to stand up and walk around the class, asking as many people as possible what their hobbies are and their reasons for liking them. Tell students to make notes and see how many people have the same hobbies and if they give the same reasons for liking them or not. Optional extension. In stronger classes or if students are motivated by this topic, they could do a survey among students in other classes or members of their extended families about what hobbies they have and why they enjoy them. Ask them to write up their findings on a poster, illustrated with suitable pictures, then presented to the class. For example, in class 7C, 15 students play sport. It helps them to be fit. 4 students play an instrument, 3 play the piano, and 1 plays the guitar. It helps them to relax and so on. Students can do the project individually, in pairs, or in small groups. Vocabulary. Hobbies. 1. Focus attention on the pictures. Students match the words with the pictures, then compare their ideas in pairs before you play the audio for them to check their answers. You may like to elicit or input further similar examples. Hobbies in art, for example, drawing, handicraft, song, composing, etc. 2. Speaking. Students discuss in pairs. Monitor students' use of the vocabulary and of the correct present tense. Make a note of any common errors to go over at the end of the activity, but don't interrupt the conversations to correct mistakes unless these impede comprehension. Reading. 1. Ask students to cover up the exercises or use the interactive whiteboard to zoom in on the text and ask them to say what kind of text it is. Accept all suggestions, web chat, instant messaging, internet notice board, social networking site posts, comments, etc. The point is for students to recognize it is an informal type of text in a new media context. Ask students to read the text and find the answers to the questions. Students compare answers in pairs before you check with the whole class. 2. Give students 2 minutes or so to think about an interesting thing they enjoy doing. Monitor and offer help if necessary. Encourage students to expand their reasons. 3. Speaking. Students work in pairs and discuss their answers from exercise 2. Encourage them also to say why they think their activity is special. Monitor and help with pronunciation and vocabulary. Grammar. Like plus ing. 1. This exercise introduces verbs used for expressing likes and dislikes. Demonstrate the task by saying 2 things about yourself, 1 positive and 1 negative. For example, I like pizza. I don't like coffee. Use exaggerated facial expressions to convey meaning and write the corresponding smiley for each statement on the board. Then give students a minute to go through the sentences and mark them in a similar way. Ask them to compare answers in pairs before you check as a class, clarifying that love is stronger than like and that can stand is similar to hate. Elicit the form we use after each verb, expressing a like or dislike, and complete the rule together. 2. Students complete the sentences and compare answers in pairs before you check with the whole class. In weaker classes and/or to check that students have retained and understood the spelling rules, ask them to write the ing forms for run, visit, eat, write, and talk first. Check these with the class, then move on to the gap fill task. 3. Speaking. Ask students to think about things they like and dislike doing themselves and compare them in pairs. Monitor as they are doing this. Then ask 2 or 3 students to tell the class something interesting they learned about their partners. Present simple versus present continuous. 1. Read the examples with the class. Then ask students to study them carefully and complete the rules, comparing answers in pairs before you check as a class. 2. Students use information from exercise 1 to help them do the matching. As you check answers, display the pictures on the interactive whiteboard and nominate a student to come up to the screen and point to the relevant picture. 3. Ask students to read the look box carefully, then quickly scan the exercise to see if any of the verbs mentioned appear. Then ask them to decide which gaps need present simple forms and which present continuous. Students complete the gaps individually, then compare ideas in pairs before you check answers with the class. Culture. The Hanoi Opera House. 1. Ask students to look at the 4 photos and elicit what they may be about. Elicit a few different answers in open class. If you're using an interactive whiteboard, you could do this as a heads-up activity with books closed. 2. Ask students to read the text quickly and match the paragraphs to the photos. Students compare answers in pairs before you check with the whole class. During feedback, ask students to code the text that supports their answers. 3. Vocabulary. In pairs, students work out the meanings of the highlighted words from the text. Check answers as a class. 4. Ask students to read the questions and to try to answer them from memory. Students read again to check their answers, underlining the key information that supports their choices. During feedback, ask students to justify their answers by referring to the text. 5. Speaking. Put students in pairs, monitor and encourage them to expand on their answers. Writing. An email to say what you're doing. 1. Ask students to read the questions and the email quickly. Then answer these basic questions. These could be written on the board as prompts. Who is the writer of the text? Phone. Who is he writing to? His friend Lucy. Why is he writing? He's on holiday and he wants to tell her about it. What kind of text is he writing? An informal or personal email? Explain to students that they now read the email more carefully and answer the 2 questions. Check answers as a class. 2. In weaker classes, allow students to do this in pairs. You may like to explain or elicit the on these starting and finishing phrases are okay to use with friends and people you know well, but that they are not all suitable for semi-formal and formal writing. 3. Students work in pairs to match the functions to the paragraphs. Point out that in a well-structured piece of writing, each paragraph should have its own purpose, which is the reason why it is written as a separate paragraph. Check answers as a class. 4. Ask students to read the instructions and referring back to their notes from exercise 1. Check that they know who, why, and what they are supposed to write. You may like to ask students to make notes in preparation for the task in class, then write the emails for homework. Remind them to cover all 4 prompts in exercise 3. Optional extension. Put students in pairs, then ask them to write real emails and send them to each other for reading. Alternatively, you could ask them like 1, 2, 3. Optional extension. Put students in pairs, then ask them to write real emails and send them to each other for reading. Alternatively, you could ask them all to email you the messages for marking. When you mark it, focus on how well they have communicated, how clear and easy the writing is to follow, and whether they wrote about relevant details. Avoid focusing too much on accuracy, as a heavily marked piece of writing is more likely to demotivate learners than to make them try hard the next time.